Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L and now let's talk Darling in the Franxx, episode 11. So we had the preview pop up on the channel and then we watched this episode and the preview did throw me off quite a bit. We went through it and it wasn't as dire as things were making it sound. It was a more focused slice of life episode, character development type episode. So we're continuing the slog through the development episodes for the characters. At this point, before we even get into the rest of the video, I do wonder what the next episode is going to be. Are we going to move into the plot, or is Futoshi actually going to get an episode for himself, right? Because last episode was Zorome's, the episode before that was Goro's and maybe Ichigo. It's a bit harder with Ichigo since she gets development with Hiro. Then we had Miku's big moment happening, maybe with the boy versus girl situation. And now, this episode does make it seem like we're going in for a catch-all situation where we're just going to grab all the characters that are left and just give them their development right now. But in this episode, Mitsuru is definitely the one that stands out. But we have Kokoro. You can make a case that Kokoro got some kind of development in here along with Futoshi. And then we had Ikuno's thing continue along. So we're at a point where, like, next episode, if they want to go and they want to give Futoshi a full episode to deal with his drama, then okay, that'd be cool. That'd be the pattern. But I think we're at a good enough place that we could just go off into the action again. But I'll leave that question up to you guys. What do you think? Want to put any bets on it? What do you think? Do you think we're going to go back into story, or are we going to stay with maybe one or two more character development episodes? We'll have to see. Anyway, this episode, let's talk about it. So I guess if we were to say what themes were going on here, it's NTR, childhood drama, childhood scars, and feelings being thrown all over the place, along with little plot points. Really, it was a packed episode with a lot of cool ideas. And after seeing what people were saying about it, there's some people could come out of this episode feeling a little bit bad. Let's talk about the story important plot elements first. And this episode continues the whole thing with 02 and Hiro. And really, 02's handling on these episodes, I feel like it's kind of been all over the place. This might also be an effect of me watching it week to week, that I'm forgetting the small nuances with 02. But it's like 02's like all upset at the beginning and she's just not talking. She's very non-confrontational. Then you go to the end of the episode where she's again hugging up on Hiro. You go back to the last episode, she's still really stressed out. We know that there are changes happening in her body. It's just 02's personality right now is just all over the place, and it's not that fun to follow her. Like, it's like she's gonna be one way at the beginning of the episode, then at the end of the episode she's gonna be feeling another way. It's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, you can make a case for that being just hormones, but at the same time, it's not that fun to watch. But we do have her little plot point being pushed forward. And in this episode, we had another plot point being pushed forward, and that was just all the stuff that Mitsuru gives us in his background, or his backstory. I think finding out about child fever, finding out again about the yellow cells, like now we can make some guesses about it because this is the second time that they have come into play, and the elixir treatment, and also finding out about the key words like pruning, which we all can pretty much tell that means parasites get plucked away. We got pruning, we got just the general rates that the parasites are growing in. So the episode's throwing in a lot of interesting details at the beginning, at the end, and those are the details that are going to carry us through to the future. So it's cool that we're getting that, and then it's just a question of whether or not this balance is going to be enough for when we actually do start going into the plot. But given like all the things we're getting along with the stampede mode and all the other little plot elements, we do have things now that if they pop up in next episodes, they don't have to be explained as much. We know that they're a thing, and we know to some degree what characters think about them. Like, we know what Nana and Hachi think about Stampede mode. We know, given the context that they were talking to Kokoro in when she went into Stampede, we understand how they feel about that mode in general. And most likely it's going to be that mode, Stampede mode, is probably a sanctioned mode that they expect to use when things are bad and when the kids are actually able to handle it. All right, so let's get into the teenage drama here. And I'm watching this episode, and the only way I can I see this issue, I see this love triangle with Futoshi, Kokoro, and Mitsuru. And first off, I want to just tell you before this, I was just kind of I was okay with Futoshi and Kokoro. I was rooting for them, and even in the podcast that we did a few weeks back, I was saying, well, I hope that he doesn't get in the way of this thing, but Mitsuru did get in the way, but it just ended up being so much more heartfelt that I can forgive it. At least that's my fan bias going in there. But yeah, looking at the situation of this love triangle, pretty much, what this pretty much was just that it was like one of those type of relationships where the boy is just putting in so much more effort, and the girl's just kind of going along with it because she has nothing better to do. It was one of those kind of really whimsical, flighty, floaty relationships. So seeing what happens here, it's just I feel bad for Futoshi, but it's funny how the show just made him into that type of guy who is just so head over heels over the girl that he likes that he just kind of loses himself. So it was interesting to see that, this type of personality can sometimes be really bothersome for the girl that has to deal with it. But seeing it here, there's also that extra layer of the things that Kokoro did before this point that makes it even more murky, or makes it even worse for Futoshi. But it was interesting to see how the dynamic played out. On Kokoro's side, I know some people are pretty sour at what she did to Futoshi, and it's me too, man. She brings up the whole thing about the promise towards Mitsuru at the end, and how she's not that great of a girl, and she's talking about how she broke a promise. And it's Kokoro, you didn't even that was just, man, the delivery for when Futoshi was saying it, he was really serious, and Kokoro was just oh yeah, sure. That's the most annoying thing ever, when someone doesn't take you seriously enough. And in Kokoro's case, it's because she doesn't know enough to actually take him seriously. The thing that really throws me off, though, and makes me feel worse for Futoshi, though, is we had little moments with Kokoro and Futoshi. Remember back when Kokoro was almost stripped naked, Futoshi was being very he was trying to be very nice, and he was just all over Kokoro. He was saying she was beautiful. We had it even before then when Kokoro was feeding Futoshi and making 02 and Hiro. When you had those type of little things happening, it made you feel oh, these two actually do care about each other. And Kokoro most likely does care about Futoshi, but this is now a bigger issue of Mitsuru and her have been having those moments in the garden, those secret love affairs in the garden, and now it's yeah, you could see this case as this girl just is with this guy because she has nothing better to do, and then she realizes when an option presents itself, it's yeah, she would like to try it out. She would like to go and ride with someone else, or she would like to be ridden by someone else, however we want to say it. So the relationship metaphors that they threw in here were really interesting. I thought this overall episode was a very interesting way of breaking up that pair, and there is some degree of oh, this was kind of cool to watch, but at the same time, it's my opinions on Kokoro, they're in a state of flux for this girl, because to me, she's the kind of girl that I would expect to get pregnant in that house. Of all the girls that are there, she's the one that I would expect to get pregnant. And now with Mitsuru being the boy she picked, it's also something that I see it more likely, especially because she has the baby making book and she's acting out her maternal instincts, or not acting out maternal instincts. She's playing the part. She's playing with that doll at the beginning of the episode. Another thing that I wanted to mention is back to Futoshi. This is coming out of my personal life experience. But I don't particularly like it when a man is telling another man to take care of the girl that he loves. I think I understand the feelings behind it, but it's also very, I don't know. It's one of those things where I would say usually you have no right to say that because you're inconsequential in all this. So it's just that on Futoshi's part, whenever I see this type of behavior, I do have a bit more of ire for it, because I think it's generally immature, and well, not immature, but it's it's behavior that's coming out of raging emotions. That's how I would say it. And so when I deal with it in real life, I don't particularly enjoy it, and I think whoever is the person that's on the other side of it, I think it's just I think it's embarrassing for the person. So that's what I'm going to say about it, but I do like how the episode portrayed it. Now, going into Mitsuru, because he gets a lot of development in this episode, and, you know, we touch on things about promises. So with Mitsuru, it's an issue of, at some points, I laughed at some point because it's like, oh, he wants to ride with Hiro in a Franxx. Oh, all right. We see in this episode, though, that same-sex pairings for Franxx maybe don't work, but that's not really a confirmation. But we see that Mitsuru wanted to ride with Hiro. We see what ultimately broke him, and that was that Hiro forgot his promise. And now, to give Mitsuru to give him the proper benefit of the doubt here, like, the poor boy went into an operation that he could have died in. That it was actually more likely that he was going to die in. And he came out, and the thing that was driving him forward was that promise. He elevated that promise to such a degree of importance that it most likely saved his life. And to find out that the thing saved your life actually was nothing to the other person, that's terrible. That's unfortunate. And given how sheltered the kids are and how little they know about the world, him getting that worked up about the promise makes sense in context, even though it's kind of funny when you think about it. Like, guys, you're getting upset over a promise. Like, even when you see Hiro in that scene, it's like, that's when you ask the guy later on, like, hey, did you actually forget that promise? Ask Hiro what's going on, because it seems like Hiro saw something terrifying. And we also have to keep in mind that Goto has put in an extra little plot point. Hiro was never really the same after a certain point, so we know that there was some kind of tampering happening with Hiro. Now, let's see. It's just, this episode gave a lot to talk about. With Mitsuru, like his whole drama, I'm happy that Kokoro is there to help him. And I'm happy that they get to a point where they're above hundreds when they actually work together to deal with the monster. I'm happy that you know, I'm happy we got a nice ending with that whole thing. One thing I do want to add is just what Kokoro and Mitsuru kind of conclude on. And this sequence has a very cringy line for me. Cringy only because in the context of our world, we know it's false. But in the context of their world, it's actually just a tragedy. And that's where, like Kokoro was saying, that the kids are not as perfect, or not perfect like the adult. What a joke that is in context, right? But okay, Kokoro makes sense. They're not as perfect as the adult. And then she just says, this is just how we're going to be. This is just how we're going to go through things. And then Mitsuru also accepts this to some degree, and we get that last sequence where he's talking about how his fever has gone down and how he's accepted that this is just how things are going to be. I hate that. I hate that so much. Accepting this is just how things are going to be. Buddy, no, go communicate. You guys live in the same house. You guys spend every hour together. You can go and talk to each other and ask each other, hey, did you actually forget this promise? Or, just talk to each other. Communication. This is the biggest issue. It's been communication. Kokoro, lack of communication, and actually telling Futoshi that maybe, hey, I don't feel that way, or I'm not sure if I want to go that far. Or even back to Mitsuru, asking about the promise. Whenever a character pretty much resigns themselves to being ineffective and just accepting the status quo and just accepting that they're accepting their faults without wanting to fix their faults when it's an easily fixable problem, that is very infuriating, and it makes things feel really bad. But that's more of me on a personal basis. I think Mitsuru deciding that he's just going to accept that this is how things are and isn't going to challenge Hiro on that promise, I think that's ridiculous. But we know the context of these kids. Finally, there's one last point that I wanted to touch on, and that is the yellow blood cells. So we know that Hiro has an abundance of yellow blood cells. We know that he got them from his interactions with 02. And now we know that Mitsuru also got an abundance of yellow blood cells due to an injection. And right now, what we've seen is that Mitsuru had something called the child fever, which we can assume is something that destroys kids. But given that his fever disappeared after he has his giant emotional moment, it does go back to what we saw with Hiro, that maybe these conditions, the yellow blood cells seem to be the gateway between the physical world and metaphysical things like emotions. The yellow blood cells seems to be what connect the two. So it seems that when characters accept something, when they make their mental state healthier, it seems that the yellow blood cells respond in a way that makes the characters healthier. With Hiro, we got it when he accepted that he was gonna help Zero 2. He accepted his place in her life. His blue rash went away. With Mitsuru, he accepts his place in Hiro's life. His fever goes down. So the yellow blood cells do seem to be the key into what causes these weird changes in the kids. Now, if we assume that all the kids have yellow blood cells, well, this is a bigger issue. Now that we know that child fever is a thing, we can assume that it's tied to the yellow blood cells. When I consider that, I wonder if maybe the kids have, let's suppose, since pruning is a thing, the kids have bad longevity rate because of the problem stemming from the yellow blood cells, such that the kids that don't have individuality, so pretty much the kids that aren't in our test group, they succumb to the yellow blood cells just because their problems or their lack of individualization, since the yellow blood cells are there to link a metaphysical state to a physical state, it just ends up killing them. So they pretty much die of not having developed emotions. I think that would be an interesting way to tie it all together. But we'll have to see how the yellow blood cells actually work. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about, but that's mostly just a little bit of a ramble. But anyway, guys, I think I'm going to end it there. Overall, it's a fun episode. It has a lot of really cool concepts. But yeah, I kind of want to see more of Mitsuru and Kokoro and see where it's actually going from there before I decide if I really am going to like this pairing, you know. But anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. Until next time, I hope you have a great day.